Welcome to Mosaic Minds, where leadership isn't a rigid canvas, but a vibrant mosaic shimmering with the unique experience of each leader. Here we delve into the fascinating interplay between culture and leadership, specifically focusing on the remarkable woman shaping Vietnam. I'm your host, May Holland, your friend Josie Vietnamese, guide on this exciting journey. As I chat with these leading women, we will explore how their cultural backgrounds have informed their leadership styles. Our guest today is Wendy Parry, an educator, a technology enthusiast with a heart for quality learning. Wendy's journey is a tapestry woven from diverse cultures, and today we will delve into how it influences her leadership styles. Welcome, Wendy. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Mike. I'm really excited to be here.
So much. So let's start our chat together. I met you when you were working in Vietnam, and so I call you as Wendy. So Wendy might be might suggest a specific heritage name, but can you tell us a little bit more about the fascinating things behind the mix of heritage?
Yeah. So my parents, my mother is Chinese and she's from Hong Kong, and my father's British, a South Londoner, born and bred in Battersea. And they met because my father was enlisted in the army in 19 probably 1950s, and one of his first posts was to Hong Kong, and that's obviously where he met my mother, a very, very, very frail, small, tiny, beautiful young lady. When I look at her wedding photos, and that actually, there's stories that my father would tell me, that he used to, he fought over my mother, and he won. Uh,
Okay, I love it.
and obviously got married. So they married in Hong Kong in 1957, and then they took a 6-week um, sort of duration to get back to the UK. They came back by boat via Singapore, because that's
Okay.
the way that the army supported them, to return to the UK. I have 4 brothers, and I'm the youngest girl. So they've gone through a whole sort of rigmarole. They finally get a girl, and that's me. But it was, you know, even as a child, being in the UK, being of mixed heritage, it was challenging. There weren't many Chinese people around. When my mother went back to the UK in 1957, they did actually leave in 57. It was freezing cold. She definitely wasn't used to that. She came from a family that had armors, and they were well cared for. Suddenly having children, and we're all quite sort of close together, um, and having to look after the children and not having a job that she would normally have had back in Hong Kong, her independence. So yeah, and then my grandparents, my English grandparents, were quite harsh. I always remember that, we were not allowed to learn or speak Chinese. We had to, basically it was when in Rome, you do as the Romans do, and nothing would change. So yeah, it's been challenging, and then I would say, as I said, being mixed heritage, being different, um,
Hmm.
has been one of the biggest hurdles I've faced. Growing up, and working in the UK, and how I feel, and how I'm perceived. But conversely, my first time in Hong Kong, in 1990, it was the opposite. So I wasn't very sort of welcomed because I have a very British accent.
Hmm.
I'm I do look a little bit Chinese. Some people see it, some people don't, which is, I always find it strange. So it's like you didn't really belong on either side.
What do you say when people ask you where you're from?
Um, it depends who asks me sometimes.
Okay.
um, I think, this might sound a little bit odd, in a podcast, but as a young woman, before I was, married, and you were approached by various, either young men, they might not be that young. And your approach, I think, your approach for a particular way that you look. So my answer to them, where they would say, "Where are you from?" Because I know they're expecting an exotic answer. Um, I would just turn around and say, "I'm from South London," in my most South London accent, because it just annoyed me, the question. But, if somebody else is a bit more culturally aware or asking me for a different reason, I'm very happy to sort of explain about, my mother being Chinese, um, and my father being British. They're both passed away now. So sometimes I find that difficult because it's like you want to say it sounds like it's present tense, but they're past tense. But then are we talking about the people or their nationality? They were, you know, well, they still are, but they're just not alive. So that I find that really confusing sometimes when I'm talking, about where I'm from. Literally, I am from South London. I was born in the UK. I don't hold dual nationality. My passport is a British passport.
So you have a British passport, yeah. So this is why it's such a difficult question, when we talk about, where you're from, for some people it's coming from a city or something.
Mm.
But, for quite a lot of us, actually, now that we delve into looking into our identity, is more than just a city or country. It can be, a mix of experiences as well. And you have a life full of experiences. So you live and work in the UK, in Hong Kong. I think you mentioned Cayman Islands as well, and Brunei, right, and Thailand now. So it's an incredible journey, really really rich. And Vietnam as well, where we met. And I was just wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about how all of this has shaped your perspective as a leader?
I think realistically, I think as a leader, I think being in education is really important for me as a leader. I think, if I definitely could not be a leader of a multinational, trans global conglomerate, because that's not what I enjoy. I think the main thing, I think the really things that changed me was my own education. Yes, I am from South London. I grew up in South London mainly, which was multicultural. And I think that early multicultural experience really shaped my understanding of respect for of people, but just being people. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, if you're from this particular country or you're from that country or you're born here, you're born there. It is about what as schools didn't have those boundaries in those times. I went this is like 1970s, it's a long time ago, and I didn't have a terrible experience at school. I had a great experience at school. I was bullied, absolutely.
Mm,
Um, but again, there were people around me who were not, British. They were not white, who would come around and rally around.
mm,
And we'd be able to sort of express how we sort of felt, and there'd be a camaraderie in that sense. People that are different. There was a bit of a camaraderie in that. But I think I was fairly lucky. I got away quite lightly, and I think a friend of mine, her name's Oyi, actually, his Chinese name is Oyi, but she calls herself Natalie now, which I didn't know until we met up 30 years later. She had it much rougher because both her parents are Chinese. They migrated from Hong Kong. They migrated over when they were much younger. They had quite a nasty experiences in terms of how they were sort of treated and perceived where they lived. So I think there was some being multicultural, sort of mixed heritage, had its was a little bit different. And I think that's the thing, whether you're the same parentage or whether you're mixed parents has a big bearing. Actually, I don't
yes.
think people really look at that enough to understand that. And I think for me that shaped me,
Mm,
because I had both values. So, I am quite patriotic. There are things I'm very proud of in being British. There's also things about sort of the Chinese aspect. And I'm going to go back more sort of the cultural Chinese, so like things like the dynasties, the sort of the Taoism aspects. You know, if we went back a lot more historical wise, things there that I find I bring into my leadership because I'm pretty much a Stoic. But when you look at Taoism and Confucianism and Buddhism, you look at what the values are, and I'm able to mix those. That I'm not at odds with those values. I think that they're all complementary,
Absolutely.
and that's what I bring in. I think, and I like cultures. I think it's interesting. I don't think that one culture is better than another. There are things that we don't like about our own cultures, and of course, there'd be things that we don't particularly understand about other cultures. But it's not something that we have to force on people.
Absolutely.
And I think it's that acceptance, and that's what in education, is where we're looking at. We're trying to find, what are the positive complementary aspects
Mm,
of our cultures, and if there's bits that don't really sit well with you, well, I'm not. Nobody's going to force you
yeah. I mean, you're
to
talking
take.
about the openness, you're talking about the complementary, you're talking about
Mm,
uh, not ranking, obviously, and not
yeah,
judging culture. But I was just thinking if you can look into more. Is there any practice or any practices, that you are noticing in your own leadership style about do you self-edit yourself culturally when you lead a team? So, I
yeah,
mean, is there
I
anything
do.
that you can share in Vietnam, for instance? Because you spend 5 years, right? Yeah. Is there any self-editing cultural practices that you have?
Yeah, I think I do, and I would do it in Thailand as well. And I think it's you know I really love working with the nationals and the locals when I'm abroad. And in fact, the reason why I wanted to go abroad is not because there was a benefit to me. Uh, there were things that in education, I just think that everybody looks towards, the UK educational style in terms of the quality, and how do you raise education qualities in different countries. And that's the reason why I went internationally for to work. It wasn't really sort of so I can get, easy holidays and things like that because I just love work.
Okay.
Um, and I just think that when you're working in a multicultural sort of organization, especially within schools, and it's quite hierarchical as well. Culturally, Asia is very hierarchical,
Oh, yes.
whereas in the UK, people are a little bit more, I'd say, forward. Um, And it's trying to get that balance right and being able to explain, if I go into an organization first, I will try and understand the organization culture more from the local side because they're the ones that are going to be there longer. And you have to be sustainable in terms of your culture. You can't come in as an outsider and say, this is the way to do it. This is what's going to happen 18 months down the line, 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, you go. And that culture is unsustainable. So I think the leadership style is making a sustainable culture that blends. And again, that complementary aspect, it's listening. There's great things that you hear, like in Japanese culture about listening. I worked for a Japanese investment companies prior to that as well. And again, that was very um, insightful. But yeah, it's about the listening. And I think, and pausing and waiting to respond, allowing everybody to have their say. It's very, Vietnamese, it is very, the socialistic aspect is very clear and everybody has a say, even though you think, well, actually they shouldn't, but they do because if everybody has a say, you can't make a decision. There's too many inputs. So that's quite difficult sometimes when you've got, you might be in a meeting of 30 people when it should be 5. Those things I think interculturally can be challenging, especially for maybe a Westerner coming into to sort of
Yes.
Asian
Yeah.
organizations. Very, very sort of, for want of a better word, slightly more old fashioned, or, they haven't quite modernized their way of thinking.
Mm,
And that's probably the biggest frustration for a lot of expats that come into Asia.
Yeah. I mean, so you're talking about the pause, you're talking about the listening, you're talking about not ranking and coming from, with sustainable culture. So if you sum up, is there any more ingredients that if you want to bottle up, your success formula, when you come to works in Asia, what ingredient would you put in of success, like the DNA of success?
I think it's really being open. That if you're closed-minded when you come across, and again, sometimes there's things, there's things I'm trying to do at the moment, and it's about, especially being from the UK and in education, everybody says, why does everybody want a UK style? And in my 5 years in Vietnam, I started thinking, in fact, I didn't go to a UK style school. I went to a very Vietnamese bilingual school, and that was on purpose. And then, but I could feel this, it's almost like colonization coming through, and it's like, and it made me stop and think. I said, why do we need to be doing this? Because the education is updated. It's there are things that could be made better, like anything. And it's, again, how do we blend it rather than saying, no, we really want this to happen or that to happen. So I think it's, the whole thing is about sort of trying to be a bit more open-minded about what you're coming into, do your research, find out about what that organization is about, what their values are. I think they're very much into mission, vision, guiding statements, get on board with those. What do they actually mean? Ask around, what do you think these mission and vision statements mean to you in your organization, and how do you think you're going to achieve them? Because that's where you feel culture will come out as well. But yeah, it's open-minded. But language can be a barrier sometimes, but I found we've got AI translation language tools now. Honestly, it's been so much easier in the last 18 months using those tools. Or even just having yourself a little bit chup chup or noi automatically of the language, just as pleasantries. I always preface it with I'm sorry, but it's going to sound really bad because I don't do tonal languages. Disadvantage of my mother not teaching me Chinese. But yeah, I just think it's sort of trying to understand a bit more about the culture of the organization and the country, what is valued, before you decide what your own decisions or strategy is going to be going forward.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you chose with intention about a Vietnamese school rather than another mainstream educational school. Can you tell us more about the you know the choice, and what was the context that you wanted just to try the Vietnamese school with children who are bilingual, correct?
Yeah. I think, again, going back to why I originally came to international education, was to give back something, to actually understand and to raise standards. Because if every child in the world has a great education, we wouldn't see such terrible things that we're seeing now, for example. But I think it's more about the fact that when I think back on myself, not knowing what my Chinese heritage should have been like, where I came from. Where did my mother come from? I don't know. In fact, she recently passed away, but just before that, she actually told my brother that she'd been adopted. And, I'm now thinking, what, even the research that I did do is now invalid. So I'm even more mixed up, unsure, what really is my culture. But missing out on a culture, which is huge, missing out on a language, which is huge. And, if I had been bilingual, my life would have been very, very different. I don't even think, we wouldn't be sitting here, for example. I think it would have been very, very different. I do love languages. When I was at school, I did learn French. I did learn German. It was all schoolgirl now. Did learn Latin. That's how old I am.
That's right.
But language is I don't know. There's a beauty about language, just as there's a beauty about maths. But that's the reason I wanted to know more about a bilingual aspect of bilingual education. I don't want to hear children whose first language is forced to speak English. I think that nurturing their home language is as important, if not more important, because those children, even if they do go abroad to study, they will come home. And that's what you need to, and you don't want languages to die out or dialects to die out. Even for me now, my mother's dialect is Cantonese. Um, it's not going to be around for very long. Speaking to a few people that I did meet in Hong Kong, I've just been there recently. They all feel that they have to speak Mandarin. It's been forced on them, and it's harder to find people who still can speak Cantonese. And I just feel that's something that's going to be lost, which means that's another disconnect
Yeah.
from my own culture, because my mother's gone, the language, her dialect is gone,
Yeah.
and it makes me more removed. So I still don't know where I belong.
Mm. And yes, and I was going to ask you the next question. So how do you view your sense of belonging, and does it differ from how other people perceive you?
I think so. I think the place where I feel I belong the most is in schools.
Okay.
Um, I went to boarding school. Eventually, I went to boarding school, and I've worked in boarding schools, and worked with a lot of boarding students. And I have a lot of positives about boarding. Boarding done well is a fantastic experience for any student, and I think it sets them up for life. There's something about boarding that it just nurtures all that independence that you have. Uh, but I think that's where I find my most belonging, is when I'm in a school. And that's a key ingredient of a successful school. If you walk into a school gate
Yeah.
and you get that sense of belonging, that school leader's done a fantastic job, because there are children out there that similar to me, they don't feel that they belong anywhere, and there's one safe place that they will feel they belong, and that's at school. So I don't feel I belong. I don't belong back in the UK. I feel more comfortable in Southeast Asia. I think I'm. It's just an easier life. Nobody sort of looks at me or thinks anything differently when I'm in Southeast, especially I live locally. I don't mingle with expats and that sort of stuff. I've always done that, actually. Even in Vietnam, I never lived in an expat area. Um, and I just think that it feels freer. I don't need to justify anything
Yes.
for myself in Southeast
And
Asia, but
yeah, you
I
sense
feel
the
that,
sense of freedom.
yeah, yeah. Whereas I think in the UK, you will always get that. Well, where are you from? You give them an answer. No, where are you originally from? And it's like, you know, I
Yeah.
was just born down the road. You're treating me like some sort of, someone that doesn't belong here. So yeah, I just think that it's strange. I have an ideal picture, dream, vision, and it is an ideal sort of thing to do. Is like, we are just governed by our passport. You can't just adopt a different country, because you're not allowed to, because there's laws, and that's why it's really hard to actually know where home is. That's why I quite like being transient. I think, not putting roots down anywhere anymore, and being transient and moving wherever I can. And that belonging, I'll always be working within an education area, and that belonging will always be when I walk through a school gate more than
Yeah.
anything else. And that's good enough for me, I think. I don't feel that I have to belong to anyone or to anywhere.
Yeah.
I think,
And I can sense the sense of freedom that you're talking about, and then richness of experience. Traditionally we always think that we have to belong to a place.
yeah,
And and I feel you completely, when you mentioned that, you can feel, where you can feel a little bit of here, a bit of here. And that is another way of belonging. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that. So what would be an advice, or many advice, or what advice would you give to young people or younger people who are navigating, mixed heritage or a little bit of challenging unfamiliar cultures? I mean, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think for younger people, and I do tell this to children, a lot of children, and and that's one thing I've seen a growth in, in Thailand and in Vietnam, where there are a lot more um, mixed cultural children, mixed heritage children coming into schools, and I do sort of, we do sort of end up talking to each other about things. Um, it is about embracing both cultures, both sides of your culture, and not one culture is better than the other, because sometimes I think there is this aspect where even I think one of the parents gives in to not expressing their own their own identity or their own culture, and then obviously media plays a big part with children. They're all scrolling through TikTok and YouTube and everything else and watching Americanized things, and they just want to be American or British, or they want to talk with these types of accents or whatever, or they're not interested in their own literature or their and it's a shame, and they should, because they will regret it later on. I wholeheartedly would say, um, I could bet that they will feel that there is something missing if they don't do it later on, and that's 100% guaranteed. I don't think there's anybody I probably have met who's mixed heritage who either wasn't given the opportunity to, or they chose not to. As they get older, they
Yeah.
will feel that there's something missing.
It
So
sounds
don't.
like we can probably share some advice to the parents to
Mm,
nurture many cultures and many languages at home as well. I do remember that I met a very lovely lady, um, born in Vietnam, and the two kids are born in Vietnam as well, and the husband is Vietnamese as well. And they send their children to an international school. They speak perfect English, but they have to take private lesson to learn Vietnamese.
it makes, yeah.
And I was shocked. You mean your children were overseas? No, 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 no. They live in Vietnam, in D7, in Ho Chi Minh City. And you're taking Vietnamese class. And, and I don't know, and I hear the children now, they were teenagers at that time. And they were saying, I wish I could speak Vietnamese like a normal Vietnamese. I was born here. So it make them feel very, very uncomfortable because people could ask them questions
Yeah.
and they have to answer.
Language, if we talk about technology, people are like scared about what technology is doing and what AI is doing and how everything, everything could get taken over. Obviously, I'm a technologist, but even with AI, the key thing is communication, articulation, oracy, and whatever language. It doesn't matter that you can't speak English anymore. I mean, there's ways around it. But yeah, but it's even just going back to sort of knowing what to do in a temple, for example. I have no idea. I'm not very good at that, and I feel that I've missed out on something, because going to a temple is, for me, is like going to, if I was going to church, it's a place of contemplation, and it's a place to be grateful, and have some sort of, do some gratification, sort of acts and rituals. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, because we should all, you know feel some sense of gratitude, and give thanks for everything that we do, and have achieved, and have. But just even, I feel a bit like, okay, you got to, like, shake the sticks 3 times, then you got to, but and it's like, I wish I knew better, so I felt more comfortable and I could go to the temple on my own, and I wouldn't have to worry about, you know, I'm thinking about, I don't want to do the wrong thing because I don't want to offend anybody, and I just think children are missing out on that, just as the same as, like, other children in the UK don't go to church. The church isn't necessarily about religion; it's about contemplation and
That's
reflection.
correct. Yeah.
And so it's just, they are missing out a lot, and actually, literary works from their home nation, um, authors. There's some fantastic Vietnamese authors. Um, it is a shame. Language is it's a wonderful thing. We don't want it to die out.
Mm. So who inspire you, Wendy?
Who inspires me? I don't have anybody that is like this major idol sort of thing. I think my education, as I said, I went to actually, people would call it government school. We call it state schools. Public school in the UK is an independent private school, so it's a bit sort of around a weird way. But I started out in state schools, but I had a very good set of state schooling up to the point that I went to boarding school. I would say my teachers, I still remember my middle school teachers, Mr. Melvin, who is a fantastic literary English teacher. Three Musketeers. I was D'Artagnan. I think authors and any work of literary art inspires me. I love libraries. I could live in a library. I think most people think, to say their parents, but I think, my parents had a very different background. They were my father was working class. I do respect my mother, the fact that what she had to go through and what she put up with more than anything. It's not really a case of an inspiration. I think there's more of a respect for that. But no, I just think anybody, for me, I can take inspiration from a lot of people. But I tend to take more inspiration through philosophical works, and what I'm reading, or sometimes what I'm seeing. Probably a little bit of a politically aspect at the moment. I'm reading Douglas Murray, because he's very clear, he's very factual, and that's the thing. I like factual things. But yeah, it's people who put across the truth, is what I would like to see. Technology, obviously, Bill Gates, met him. He was inspirational at the time, even though he was quite quiet. But no, I think students inspire me probably more. If I really think about it, what my students have done and what they've achieved, and what they're going to achieve,
Yes.
we would never have done what these young people are doing now, especially the exceptional ones that are doing so well,
Yeah.
what they've done. I think
Yeah.
students, this is hard for students. When I talk about my education,
Yeah.
I loved it, but it was, I think, probably a bit easier, um, in that sense, because we didn't have all these distractions and everything else that went on. For younger people, I think it is a lot tougher. Competition's tougher.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. And for our listeners, so what mantra or what quotation helps you to navigate with cultural encounters?
Again, I don't really have anything in particular, but if I'm feeling a little bit challenged, I'll always go back to reading a bit of Meditations from Marcus Aurelius. I'll always sort of look at, I'm very much a Stoic, as my Latin background.
Yep.
Uh,
I
I'm
feel
also
you.
I'm an existentialist as well. I think for me, everything has to have purpose. And I think that, again, that goes back to sort of Taoism and Buddhism aspects. So yeah, I sort of bring in lots of different sort of inspirational aspects. Sometimes I see a quote and I think, oh, that's quite cool. And then, 6 weeks later, I think, no, actually, that doesn't quite fit what I was thinking. I think it depends on your mood,
Yeah.
what inspires you, and what you feel is relevant to you. So, some things I might have thought was inspirational 3 years ago, I think actually, no, it doesn't fit any longer because the world changes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, have to be agile, isn't it? And
Yeah.
very flexible now. And I think that is the quality that we all need to have, liking it or not.
Yeah.
And talking about, so you're talking about students before, you're talking about, the teachers who are inspiring you. Can you share with us a little bit more about, your proud moments? What accomplishment are you most proud of, both personally and professionally?
I think personally is actually putting both my children through university as a single parent, which isn't easy. And they were at university at the same time. My son was not. My son's not a standard child, put it the way. He's quite a challenging child when he was younger, and things didn't work out the same what we expected him to do. I think he's still trying to find his way as well, and I think that reflects on what a lot of young people are struggling with at the moment. So yeah, get my children through university, and they're okay. And I think, as a parent, that's okay. They don't have to be these wildly successful people. They have to find their own way. Professionally, it's not. I wouldn't. Most people say, "Oh, becoming a principal." No, it's not the actual title. That is really the professional aspect. I think it's more about the number of children that I have had the privilege to work within education, so contributing to their education, contributing to their successes, and colleagues as well. I think for me, that's how I've seen colleagues grow, come up the shells, and themselves be successful. I think professionally, there's other, there's things you could tick off and say, I did this or I did that, but I think it's what you do for other people is what I'm probably more proud of, because I've never been in anything for myself. So
I hear so much wisdom, so much humility, so much giving. It sounds like obviously, you're an education, you're an educator. It's so obvious that it's really about giving and seeing when you see people growing and transformed by education, that's the gift for life. So really thank you for sharing both wisdom. And the last question that I'd like to ask you is how can our listeners cultivate mosaic mind that you are having so then they can embrace those global cultures?
I think the best thing is, you know, I would say that, you seek out opportunities to meet different people from different backgrounds. Gone are the days where you're sitting in an organization for 15, 20 years, same job sort of thing, just moving up the ladder maybe. I think sometimes you have to take a leap of faith and try something different or move somewhere different to gain greater exposure. I think you have to expose yourself to experiences. So even if they're not good, can't have there's no such thing as a perfect life. I've made lots and lots of bad decisions in my career and personal life. But you grow from it. That's the thing. We always teach our children, learn by your mistakes. Well, it doesn't stop when you grow up. So yeah, I think there's lots of things that can be done. Education, your own education, get onto free courses, but not just ones where you're learning by yourself. Find somewhere where there's interaction across a course globally. There's all these online aspects that, one thing the pandemic did very well for businesses is to open up that sort of more global online access to communication and culture. But yeah, it's you have to seek out opportunity. They don't come falling on your lap. You actually have to go out and sort of cultivate. And I think the word cultivate is the key thing. It's a word I use quite a lot now. My next move, what I do next, I'm trying to cultivate the key ingredients to make it happen. And I think that's what you have to do. If anything else, learn a different language. Even for me, I like learning language. I don't like speaking them because I think I'm doing a terrible job. But as long as I can understand, again, this is more of the listening rather than the speaking. I think that is something, because through language you start thinking about culture, and then as everybody loves food. So when you've got a bit of language, a bit of culture, then you get into the food, and all of those soft things, would stand you in good stead as you sort of build your career and leadership. Yeah, I think the word cultivate, I think, is the key word I'd like to use. Cultivate the opportunities. Go seek out, find out the exact things that you need to put into place to achieve your goals.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for those words of wisdom, Wendy. I knew that, when we were going to talk together today, that you were going to share some very good insight, for our listener, young or not so young. It absolutely doesn't matter. And as you said, we're all learning another language, and I'm still struggling with my own, another language I'm learning at the moment, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's really about cultivating that sense of curiosity and having the feeling that you are moving forward even if it's just a small step, but that it's really about it. So Wendy, thank you very much for sharing again, your wisdom.
Thank you.
And as you embark on your next adventure, remember, Mosaic Mind is always here to celebrate the leadership tapestry. I think we can share also, the links on your social media, on LinkedIn, down below here. And we will also have a poll, about knowing who is listening here, from where they're coming from, really, exploring their own cultural identity. And I think that's crucial, to deepen this conversation, because it's not, as you say, it's not just about the passport. It's about all the things that we don't always share to other people. So thank you, Wendy, for today, especially for your time and all the sharing. And let's have another talk again, but I'm sure that you will have more sharing to do as well. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.